Hello, welcome back to the Scale Modelling Cafe and welcome back to part 3 of the Kotare Spitfire. This episode deals with the construction, and this is quite a good shot to start with because this is a bit of a theme of the kit, and as with the cockpit you really need to clean everything, all the moulding pips and stuff, quite closely, quite carefully. Now you'll see in episode 1 I announced that I'm not going to rivet this kit. Yeah, that didn't last very long. So it was out with the plans, out with the pencil, out with the riveter and ruler, and yeah, fairly simple job actually, because the fuselage is pretty much all done. All the raised rivets are there and some of the recessed rivets are there. However, there are also some rivets missing from the fuselage as well, so they were added. And as you can see, I'm just using the metal ruler and just going along the pre-drawn lines. And yeah, fairly simple rivet pattern on this one, I must say, but it did make a massive difference, and I'm really pleased that I took the plunge. Now the rivets are going to be slightly raised, so I just used this, I think it was 800 grit sanding sponge, just to knock the edge off. I didn't want to sand too much because I thought they might disappear. But just a very gentle rub, just to knock the raised bits back just a little bit. And then here we are once everything's all cleaned up. Time to glue the tail planes together. Standard, I nearly said tube glue actually. It's not tube glue, it's the kind of resin type glue from Mk.Ia. And then just going over the seams with the ammos extra thin, and that will just seal everything up. And taking no chances, so a bit of clampage. For the hand pump option, the instructions say to just cut out this little sort of gap here, and that allows the hand pump mechanism in the wheel well to go in. And then time to paint the wheel wells, and a lot of people will paint everything in the silver lacquer, but that's not true. So silver was only on the internal parts, and on the Spitfire that was the inner part, and as per the Air Ministry's sort of direction, whereas the wheel well itself, where the wheel sits, was classified as part of the external part of the airframe, and that's why that was in the underside colour. Different to the Hurricane, where the whole wheel well was classified as the interior, so that was all silver. The gun barrels were drilled out. There's a little depression moulded in, which actually makes it a lot easier. And then these were painted and then dry brushed, just to highlight the sort of opening. And that's well worth doing actually, that makes a difference. Oil wash. This is just Starship Filth from Ammo. Just in a bottle cap with a bit of thinner, mixed to the right consistency, and that was just painted on, allowed to dry, and then polished off. And that tone works very well against the sky, but also the silver areas as well. It's thinned down a little bit, and this is a kind of filter really on the inner parts, and then more of it as a wash on the silver parts, and then it's just polished off with a cotton bud. So pretty much exactly the same as the cockpit technique that you would have seen in the last episode. Time to put the wings together now, and actually this is out of sequence because this is the very first job I did on this kit. I just wanted to give the wings maximum drying time before sanding the seam. So This is actually before the cockpit. But I thought for continuity it would look better in the construction phase. So that spar there sets the dihedral very nicely. The one-piece wheel wells go in. I say one piece, there's actually another piece, that hand pump that I mentioned before, that goes in that cutout. And that sits nicely in. But belt and braces out with the Swedish clamps, and that will just hold that in place and allow the glue to dry. Now some people have put the wheel well on the upper wing. I don't think it makes any difference actually. There's the guns in place, and now it's time to put the upper wing on. So this is all actually really quite quick. So kudos to Kotare, they managed to mould those wheel wells in a single piece. So just putting the resin type glue in. You've got to work fairly quickly with this stuff. It does sort of dry quite quickly. You can see I'm not hanging around with the upper bit, faffing about, but trying to do it quickly. But the bond is really super strong, actually. So we'll just apply a little bit of pressure, and then it's out with the glue again. The extra thin to go along the seams, and that will just seal everything in. And then I'll clamp all that down to within an inch of its life, and I'll leave that for, you know, almost a week actually. So these hatches are separate. The fit is absolutely brilliant, almost to the point of why did they do that separately and not just engrave it? I don't know. Maybe catering for the aftermarket. But there we are. Right, so this caused me a bit of confusion because I put it in and went, hang on, that doesn't look right. So I actually glued it too far back because the hole is round and it's too big. But I suppose it gives you a bit of wiggle room. Cockpit goes in next, and yeah, the resin glue applied on the bottom part, and then just where I can in with the extra thin. And then we can glue the cockpit in place, and you see it's all quite tight and flush in there. So pretty much the only exposed seam here is underneath. So this had my usual super glue treatment, and that can be rubbed down straight away. And what I did is up to the longitudinal panel line is I removed all the raised rivets and then eventually replaced them with some 3D printed decal rivets. I did film that, but actually I got it out of shot, which is really annoying, so I do apologise for that. But if you can put a decal on, you can put the rivet decals on. It's exactly the same. You just measure it, cut it to length, and just apply them in the way like a normal decal. So once the seam's together, I run a smear of the super glue over the top. This is the ammo slow dry stuff, and then that can be sanded flush and all the recessed panel lines put back in. And then I thought I'd give the coloured glue a workout, just so no real reason other than you can see exactly where it goes, so you can make sure you get the entire seam. You can see how well it all fits. It's so well engineered. Just that capillary action, draw that along the gap, and then we'll apply a little bit of pressure. Now it's important that you don't get any gaps here, because obviously we've got other airframe parts gone over the top. So out with the Swedish clamps again. Belt and braces really, just to make sure. This is very important here to get this actually stuck together properly, again with no gappage, because there's a separate part you'll see me do in a bit that goes over the top. So to make sure there were no accidents, It was out with the tape and quite a bit of pressure, as you can see, to make sure that doesn't move, and then we'll set that aside to go off. Here is that separate part, and the cutout there is for the clear bit. So that was all painted, and actually I varnished it as well. It's going to make the masking job redundant, really. Separate cowlings, make sure you get the right one, and that seats really nicely with that sort of raised square. There's a recess on the inside, and it just fits beautifully. Clips into place and just sealed in with a bit of extra thin. Here's the other one. And just that smear will just seal it all in. No drama. Fuel tank cover now, the armoured fuel tank cover. So this is a later, early Mark 1 that had the armoured fuel tank cover. Now this wanted to spring up a little bit, and I had a hairline crack. Even though I used my Swedish clamps and quite a bit of force, I did have just a hairline gap, which might be realistic, but I didn't like it. So that was all sorted out with a bit of Mr. Surfacer, just applied with a cocktail stick, make sure it went in the hairline gap, let it dry for a few hours, and then remove it with a cotton bud and a bit of thinner. And the one-piece top cowling part, which just plonks on. And the fit around all these separate panels was really nice. In fact, more than really nice, it was beautiful. And you can see there, I've actually painted the exhaust area. And actually I did get a bit of overspray when I painted the camouflage. But it's well worth doing. It creates that sort of hollow look. I did go in and touch in that area. Right, here's that spine bit. So the fuselage is dry now, so I know it's not going to move, and that just slots in really, really nicely. And you can see there, by painting it around the light and varnishing it, when I put the light in, I'm not going to have to mask that at all. So that's a bit of a bonus. And then all we'll do is we'll just seal up the seams with the extra thin. Easy, job done. Well, actually, not quite job done. I did, you'll see in a minute, out comes the tape just to hold the front down. But that part sits really nicely, actually. Here comes the tape, and that'll just hold it into place. Now the raised rivets here, I did think were just a little bit too prominent for my tastes. So they did get a bit of rubbing down as well with that 800 grit sanding sponge. And actually just knocking them back a bit, I thought made a big difference. So what we'll do, we'll just finish applying the glue, and then we'll just leave that all to go off. So here's the aforementioned Mr. Surfacer. I did say I'll put it on with a cocktail stick, didn't I? That was wrong. Obviously I used a brush. Now there was a tiny little pinhole right at the back in the corner. I think because it was, you know, it's moulded as square as they can, but it, you know, it did round off ever so slightly, just a tiny bit. Wiped it away with the finger straight away. And that was no drama. And then I thought, while I've got the Mr. Surfacer out, I'll just check the seam. And actually, when I sanded that away, it left nothing. So the seam was perfect. Right, these are the wing fillets, and you can see the shiny in the middle there. That's just 5-minute epoxy. And while that was drying, I just cleaned up this seam here. Could have edited that more sensibly, really, but this is the kind of the order I'm doing it in. Right, out with some paint. The tolerance is really tight here, and I thought I'll just save myself a bit of a masking job. So the area around the tail was painted, the tail planes were painted, and you can see I'm just drilling out the lightning holes. That is in the instructions, and there is a depression there. Just touched in with the brush because they are going to be deflected. And then what I can do is just push that forward into position. Again, it's really tight, so make sure you push it all the way forward. These tabs on the elevator are moulded such that you do have a droop in the elevators. Almost forgot what they were called then. And then there's the capping piece on the back, which actually was a real fiddle to get in. But it went in eventually, and you can see I'm not going to have to do any masking there. Right, I spent ages looking in the instructions and looking for parts on the sprue for an actual radiator, because to the naked eye, without paint, that looked completely smooth. But actually, it's so fine that it doesn't need a separate part, which I think is brilliant. That back bit, don't worry about doing that. I don't know why I did that, because the back part of the radiator, as you can see there, is moulded in with the cover. Just some brass wire for the actuating rods. Again, that's all called out in the instructions. And then you just glue it in. So pretty much a single piece other than the wire for that radiator cover, which is really cool. You can see that I've also painted with chrome the light underneath. I don't know if that's a landing light or not. Yeah, that was chromed with Mk.Ia stand. Oil cooler, just again, that's one piece, and that just goes in. And you might think the fit's not perfect, but it's actually designed like that because the fit on the real thing wasn't perfect, and it's all replicated in the kit. Sounds like a bit of a get-out clause, but it's not. Clear cover goes on now, and then that's going to be masked up. I'm just taking a brave pill and using the blue extra thin, which is a bit daft really, because if it does wick underneath, that's going to be a pain. But I got away with that. The main event, wing to fuselage. Main event in any kit really. And you can see here from the dry fit, bit of pressure and it just clicks in, and that fit is great, and it holds itself together as well. It's just really cool. There was again a slight hairline gap, and I did clamp it at the back there, so I did use the Mr. Surfacer again. As I said, I think because the tolerances on this kit are so tight that if there's the tiniest little bit of paint or anything like that, it is going to affect things. But you can see that clampage and the pressure is going to close the gaps up to an absolute minimum. Nothing required at the back. That all just sealed in, ended up looking like a panel line. Just trying to get it as close to the join as possible. There we are, and then we'll just leave that to fully harden off. The lower cowling, again, that just fits on. A few hairline gaps at the back actually, but I decided to leave it because the real thing's like it. Transparencies are masked inside and out, and then the inside is sprayed and then has a matte varnish, and then just using the Ammo Ultra Glue to glue those on, so you're not going to get any super glue type fogging, and it's a strong super glue when it cures. Obviously it takes a lot longer to cure, but it's absolutely epic stuff, this. Highly, highly recommend it. Gun sight's gone on, and it's deckled as well. And a slight gap there, ever so slight. So I did end up going in with a tiny bit of filler. You can just see it there at the front. Just trying to seat it properly. So a bit of tape to hold those down, and then just using spare canopy, spare door, and that's going to mask off the canopy. And then actually what I do is put the real canopy over that, so it all paints and weathers exactly the same as the rest of the fuselage. And that's it. Construction complete. So thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one for the painting. Cheers, bye bye.